Greetings from New Haven. Welcome to the webinar Introduction to Investment Management Theory and Practice, also known as Yale CIMA Prep Course. My name is Fiona Bi, and I'm the Senior Account Manager at Yale Executive Education. To everyone on the line, we at Yale Executive Education hope that you and your families are doing well. There's a lot happening in the world right now, and we know with the global health crisis comes complexity, uncertainty, and shifting of priorities. This is our 5th year offering this program, and in that time, we have worked with over 2,000 participants. In our webinar this afternoon, we encourage you to listen and engage. If you have questions, please post them. This is your time to get your questions answered. Our program director, Jim Dobbs, is very knowledgeable, and this is your opportunity to pick his brain. To ask questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your question to everyone or just to me. I suggest you send it to everyone. They may have a similar question in mind. Another option is a chat button. Typically, we prefer you use a Q&A for questions directed towards the speaker and chat for technical questions you would like assistance on. Now to introduce our program director. Jim Dobbs is a CIMA certified. He's also CFP and CPWA certified. He was a financial advisor himself for 25 years and ran his own RIA practice before retiring from it to work full-time in his financial education company. Jim has worked with the different certified bodies and universities for the last 17 years, helping build and manage financial certification programs. More importantly, though, Jim has had extensive experience with the Investment and Wealth Institute, formerly IMCA. He personally helped create the CPWA certification and has served the IWI in many roles, including as a chair of IWI's Technical Advisory Board. You will see he's a passionate guy. He's committed to success, and he measures his success based on yours. So let's welcome Jim Dobbs.
Well, thank you, Fiona. I appreciate that. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So Fiona's right. We just kind of want to walk through the Yale CIMA online program, show you what it is, show you what it isn't, show you what to expect if this is the right vehicle for you as you move towards CIMA certification. Now, that being said, we're going to kind of start a little more basic than that. We're going to actually go through CIMA certification, how it compares to some of the other certifications you've probably heard of. And I just want to give you some links and some resources for those of you who are still considering what's the best certification for you. And then, as you can see from the outline, I'm going to dive into the program itself, kind of some high-level material and some details as well. This will take about an hour, depending on the number of questions you have. I want it to be a very thorough review for you as you determine, A, is CIMA certification right for you at this point in your career? And number 2, or B, is the Yale School of Management online program the right avenue for you to pursue your certification? So keep those questions coming on in, and I'll stop a few times and Fiona will stop me, and we'll do questions along the way. And then if we have time at the end, we'll even kind of do a free-for-all regarding questions and answers at that point. So again, no silly questions. Everything's fair game. You just go right ahead and ask as Fiona directed you to. All right, so I'm going to start pretty basic. I'm not going to go through the super detailed topic list, but here's the kind of the core topic list for CIMA. I think you probably are in the right place. I hope that you are. This program was built for investment professionals, including financial advisors, financial planners, investment consultants, etc., who are working with clients. Most of our participants, most candidates, are client-facing. It's not for individuals, not in the business. It is for individuals pursuing CIMA certification. So it goes very, very closely lockstep with the topics list. And as you can see here, some of these things are a little bit basic. There'll be a little bit of a review on statistics, time value of money, economics, capital markets history, just kind of basic business school content. Some of you probably did not major in finance or business, so this will be helpful. And then section 2 there is kind of what I call the series exams review. In your series 7 and your other exams, maybe 6, and then your blue sky exams, you studied about fixed income and equity, stocks, bonds, those kind of things. So it's kind of your series exam review. And then we get into the more applied material beginning in section 3. So that's not only modern portfolio theory, postmodern portfolio theory, but it's also behavioral finance. I think all of us in practice know that theories are important and models are important, and our construction methodology is very important, but you've got to overlay all of that with not only investor or client behavior, but our own behavior as professionals. So it's a mixture of those two. And then section 4 is just more math. We'll talk about math along the way through the rest of this info session, but it's measuring everything. We're going to measure risk. We're going to measure performance. We're going to measure risk-adjusted performance. We're going to measure a lot of things in that section. And then section 5 is what I call the implementation section, if you will. And that's just applying it in a deeper kind of way. And we review that. So that's, think of client fact patterns, mini case studies, those kinds of things. So that's client discovery, creating an investment policy or IPS, more portfolio construction, manager search and selection for those of you doing active management, and then portfolio review and revision. So everything from, in that regard, from portfolio review on the rebalancing side to revisions if you're doing something like tactical asset allocation. So if you want the full 4 or 5 page PDF color coded with the exam weightings, you can get it on our website. You can get it on the IWI's website, or you can just shoot me a quick email. And after we get done here, I'll send that over to you. As you'll see, there are over 500 topics. I would argue there's at least 1,000 subtopics. So there's a lot, and I'll kind of explain how we tackle that both from a course standpoint and from test prep as well in just a little bit. All right, quick certification comparison. This is CIMA, Certified Investment Management Analyst. Now you can use the noun advisor as well with CIMA. That is different from the CFA, which most of you have probably heard of. I think CFA is outstanding, but most particularly, in my opinion, for those of you or individuals in our industry who really aspire to be an industry or company securities analyst, leading eventually to become an institutional portfolio or money manager. Look, if that's going to be the level of your involvement in the business, and you're going to really be charged with reviewing financial statements on a daily basis, picking and choosing individual securities to go into the portfolio and when to take them out of the portfolio, I think that's perfect for CFA. And if that is your goal in your career, I personally believe you ought to be moving in that direction. Now, that one takes a lot longer, as you'll see. Ours about 6 months or less for most of our candidates that come through the Yale program. And I'll talk about timing in a little bit. CFA is more like 3 to 4 years. So it's definitely a deeper dive, and it's a bigger commitment. But if that's your goal, analyst or institutional portfolio manager, I think that's the direction you ought to be going. CFP, you've heard of, probably, Certified Financial Planner. I hold that certification as well. That, just as the title would indicate, it's financial planning. So it's kind of almost everything under the sun regarding financial planning. And there are now hundreds of different educational opportunities to get the education box checked when you're working towards CFP certification. And I say that because you're going to have anything from a certificate program that may be a fast track, knock everything out in 9 months, and it really is focusing most on the exam, all the way to master's level CFP programs where, and they're full time for 2 years, you're really taking a deep dive in some of those areas, and then everything in between. So that one depends on which educational program you choose, but it is financial planning. CIMA, which you're here for today, is just investments. So it's a deeper dive in one of the sleeves, if you will, of CFP. Investments is one of the key now 5 or 6 sections. So we're just taking a deeper dive. So if you've done CFP, some of this will be review for you from probably your CFP days. That being said, we're just going to take a deeper dive now on the investment side. And then CPWA, it's a sister program over at Yale for us for the CIMA program. And that's kind of like financial planning, but for high net worth. So that's a deeper dive into the challenges and potential solutions for your high net worth clients. So think 5, 10, $20 million clients. That's what CPWA is as a curriculum and how it's different from CFP and CIMA. And obviously CPWA covers more than just investments. Investments is just one sleeve there. Now, I do want to bring this to your attention. It's been, as Fiona mentioned, several years now since we've been offering the CIMA program at Yale. And now we've gotten 2 or 3 maybe now individuals like this who actually are in the business and they're actually in charge of training at their firm, and they've switched from CFA to CIMA, but for select individuals. And it kind of goes with what I said before. Look, if they're going for portfolio manager or analyst, it's still CFA. But if they're client facing, if they're on the sales side, if they're on the customer service side, if they do investments, but top down, not bottoms up, then CIMA seems to be a better fit for a lot of people. So it's nice to have participants come out of the program, earn their certification, and then go, yeah, that actually was right on the money. This is going to be a better training tool for us internally for our client-facing advisors. All right, just a little bit more, and then we'll stop for early questions. Do maybe 2 more slides. Here are some great resources if you're still in the kicking the tires phase of certifications, because there are a lot of them out there. I would argue that maybe half a dozen to a dozen are really valuable, the rest are not. That doesn't mean you can't get education or knowledge from those that are tightly run and run at the highest level, but they're just not as credible out there in the industry. CIMA is accredited. It's one of the only financial services certifications that is accredited. It's one of the reasons we offer it at Yale, because the certifying body, Investments and Wealth Institute, takes this so seriously. They want to work at the highest level for professional certifications, and CIMA has that accreditation through ANSI. It's a global, it's the Global Professional Accrediting Board. So value and benefits, why to think about CIMA? Obviously, we're talking a little bit about that today. There's some great third-party resources through IWI's website, and you can find those either through IWI's website, or you're going to get a copy of this slide deck in a few days, and you can just click on the links here if it's more convenient for you. Candidate profile, I think, is very helpful because that's more specific to who are CIMA designees. Where do they work? What kind of firms? What kind of jobs do they have? How long have they been in the business? How much money are they managing themselves or within their group? How much money do they make? Here's a cool one. How much money do they make compared to those who don't have a certification or who hold a few other certifications? So I think that's kind of enlightening. So check that out if you haven't seen that already. I think CIMA or IWI does a nice job of showing you how to market yourself using CIMA certification once you've earned that. Of course, you'll have questions on renewal requirements. There will be a continuing education requirement. You've got to pay fees. As a CIMA designee myself, every 2 years, I've got to have my 40 hours of CE, and I pay my renewal fees, and then I'm done for 2 years. Quick note on that, for those of you with other certifications. So I hold a few. You may have seen it on the title slide. I can't remember if it's on there or not, but CIMA, CPWA, CFP. CIMA and CPWA have 40 hours of CE required every 2 years. CFP has 30. So the good news is, especially between IWI and CFP board and some other organizations as well, you can kind of double and triple dip. So that's what I do. I'll probably pick up 50 hours of CE over a 2-year period of time, not counting my teaching. And then I can apply that to CIMA, CPWA, and CFP. And so it's not like I'm doing like 110 or whatever that would be in total. So you will be able to cross over your different designations. You just want to look at the rules from your certifying body to make sure you understand what you can and can't do. And then there's a cool fact, it's a relatively new, a fact page on IWI's website as well for just miscellaneous kind of questions. All right, let's talk about our program goals and objectives. It's very important, I think, that you know what the educational body is trying to do when they're delivering a program like this for you. So with that in mind, if you're considering Chicago Booth or Wharton, for example, I think you do your due diligence, just like you're doing here. If they have an info session, watch it. I'm not sure if they do or not, but if they do, you want to watch it. If they don't, you want to pick up the phone and call and ask your questions. So I think that's how you're going to compare. All three schools are great. I think that the programs are strong. It's mostly a learning style and preference choice in which you may feel most comfortable going through. But our kind of top line, most obvious objective is to cover the 500 topics between our course part, which I'll talk about. Think of that as part A, and the test prep part. We're the only one that includes both of those in one program, just trying to make it a little easier, right? We know you've got to take a big daunting test after you finish with us. So we want to do everything we can to help you pass that test. So we put it in part A is the course, part B is your test prep. Going to cover all 500 topics for you. Here's what I'm more excited about, because I think in 10 or 20 years, this one makes the biggest difference. It's harder to measure. So it's not quite a SMART goal if you want to think of it that way. But this needs to be applicable. This needs to be not just theory and methods and models. It needs to be something that you can take, whether it's a measurement tool or a way to analyze things or different ideas on how you structure a portfolio. I want you to be able to take that and plug it into your practice, whether you're managing money like I did for so many years on a discretionary basis, or whether you're a salesperson or customer service person. You still need to know what your firm, obviously you need to know what your firm is recommending. I want you to be able to look under the hood and determine, okay, well, why are we recommending that? I know I'm supposed to recommend that, but why are we doing that? And can I answer the really hard questions from knowledgeable prospects on, well, yeah, why do you use that strategy? I've heard of these other strategies. Why do you invest in crypto or why do you not? I want you to be able to think through at that level. And so that's how we've designed this program to help you develop those kind of skills. And then last, but certainly not least, is to pass your certification exam. Hopefully on your first attempt. You can go to IWI's website, go under CIMA, and then I think it's like CIMA exam or CIMA exam overview, something like that. It's just a drop down and go into there and you can see the recent pass rates. For the last quarter they have on their website, Yale CIMA candidates on a first attempt had a 77% pass rate. So that's actually a little high for us. 2/3 to 3/4 is pretty normal in any given quarter. Now, these are relatively small sample sizes, unlike CFA. You're talking tens of thousands of people taking any one of those three tests at any given time. So they're smaller sample size than that. So we can see some variation in pass rates. Long-term pass rate, like 2 years plus for CIMA, it seems to bounce between about 55 and 67%. 67% would be high. 55 would be closer probably to long-term average. Anything closer to 50 or under would be low for CIMA pass rates. But again, go to their website. You can kind of see more about the historical pass rates there in their particular site. All right, well, let me just stop right there, Fiona, and let's see if we've got any early questions.
We only have the one question, but I think you kind of answered it in your second slide, but I can repeat here. I'm currently working on CFP and sit for the exam in March 2022. How does the CIMA differ?
Yeah, good question. So congratulations and good luck to you when you take the CFP exam. It's a challenging exam. Hopefully you pass that, and then hopefully you'll be looking at coming on board with us, or at least pursuing your CIMA certification. So as I mentioned before, and you were right, Fiona, did kind of briefly allude to it, you're just going to take a much deeper dive in investments than you're probably taking in your current CFP program. Now, if you're taking a graduate level, like a master's level program, where you have 3 investment courses, in your curriculum, well, then maybe you are taking as deep a dive. If you have questions on that, because you're like, well, that may be the case and I don't want it to be too redundant, just give me a shout tomorrow. I've got some pretty good availability. Either email me at that email I showed you before, and I'll show you again, or call me, either way, and we'll kind of talk it through regarding your particulars. That being said, you kind of bring up an issue that I do want to address, because I don't think I've got it in the slides, and that's timing. And I think timing is important, guys. As you're going to see, you've got a year of access to the Yale material. Shouldn't take anybody ever a year to get CIMA certified, in my opinion. And again, 4 to 5 months is about normal for us. So under 6 months, once candidates engage in our material and really start through the material in earnest. But I think timing is important, because when you look out, since a year's really comfortable, there is still a clock on you in terms of your Yale access. So if you look out, if like you're a heavy tax professional, right, and you're going to do year-end planning between now and the end of the year, and you're doing compilations and a lot of tax work in the first quarter, well, now is not the time to jump into CIMA. Wait till you get to April, you clear that hurdle, and then jump in. I think more practically for most of us, because most of you probably aren't tax professionals, when I think back on my practice for 27 years, you can kind of predict some ebbs and flows of your work expectations going forward. Now with clients, all bets are off. You never know what's going to happen and who's going to call you tomorrow, with whatever situation. But I think you look at your calendar over the next 6 months and you say, does that period look good? Well, I don't know if it looks good or not. Does it look worse than most 6-month periods? If it does, then punt, come back down the road in 3 or 6 months, see how it looks, and consider the timing at that point. If you look at the next 6 months and go, well, that doesn't look any worse than it normally does. I mean, I'm super busy and I got family and social obligations and whatever, but it just doesn't look any worse than others. Okay, well then, now may be the time for you to jump in. So I think you want to jump in when your schedule is not clear. It's never going to be clear, but it doesn't look too bad, and you're excited. You've got some extra motivation to really jump in and get going. So that would be my advice on the timing side. All right, so let's just plow ahead, and I'll stop again in a few slides and we'll see if there are any questions. Flexibility and convenience, that's why we set this up the way we did. At the time, there weren't any other online programs. There still aren't in the way that we've done it, in that we're asynchronous and we have ongoing enrollment. So you apply and register when you're ready. So that's kind of unique. It's not kind of unique, it is unique. And then everything's on demand. We stopped doing live sessions when we learned, we might have 200 people in the program. Now these days we have 500 or 600 in the program at any given time. And very few people came on to the live sessions because people want to study at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon or Saturday afternoon or whatever. So it's all on demand. You're going to jump in there and do it whenever and wherever you choose. And I say wherever because everything's downloadable. So you don't even have to be online, other than some mandatory tests I'll talk about to complete the Yale education course. You can just download and do it in your car, train, plane, wherever. You don't really even have to be online, although it'd be more convenient to be online, but really you don't even have to do that. You could just download a video and watch it from your hard drive or from the cloud. You could download the slides and watch them, from your iPad or your phone or whatever. Studying at your own pace is a big one. So a lot of people that come into our program, and by the way, in any given quarter, about 62% of new CIMA candidates choose Yale. And this is a big reason because you can move through as fast or slow as you want. If you want to try to power through in a month or two, which we have candidates do on a regular basis, it's totally up to you if you want to do that. We're going to give you, study schedules, and we're going to give you ideas on best practices, how people have gotten through effectively and efficiently before, but it's up to you on whether you want to follow that or try to speed it up or slow it down. Some people are like, no, I don't want to rush. I've never done online before. This is my first serious certification, professional certification. I need to take my time. I need to take this very seriously. So, you say 6 months or less, it may take me 8 or 9 or 10 months, but I just don't want to rush. So in this program, you're just moving at your own pace. And as I mentioned, You can download, copy, save, and print. Just don't share it with anybody. That's the Yale policy. We don't send out hard copies, but you can print anything that you want. All right, so now some real nuts and bolts here, just on fee. So our fee is $4,500. That includes the registered education course. So when you complete that, and I'll show you what you're going to do that in just a minute, you're going to be checking that certification requirement box, if you will, over at IWI. It actually costs money to get into candidacy. So if you're not familiar with IWI and those links I gave you, you definitely want to go to their website. They are your certifying body. They manage the certification. They administer and manage the certification exam. You'll pay your dues to them going forward. I think they're a really good, reliable resource for you. So you want to get comfortable with their website because you'll be on it for years to come, hopefully. I think right now it's about $995, so $995 to apply for CIMA candidacy. That includes a number of things, includes some additional study resources we'll talk about in a minute. Your background check, they're going to do one now when you start the process. They're going to do one once you've passed the certification exam before they actually certify you. It also includes right now 2 attempts at the certification exam, which is nice. Fortunately, as I mentioned, most of our candidates don't need 2 attempts, but if you do, if you're one of those that do, 2 attempts will be covered. All right, so our $4,500 for the Yale material and all the test prep is all inclusive. You're not going to need to do anything else. You're not going to need to pay anything else. That's all you need to do. As I mentioned before, you can, because we have this ongoing registration, you can enroll at any time. As long as you're a CIMA candidate and good standing, and when you apply and get accepted by IWI, they'll give you a candidate number. It's like 6 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you've got that candidate number, then you can jump on to the Yale CIMA program site, click on register now, put in your contact information, your payment information, and that candidate number. And then in a few days to a week, you should be up and running with us. All right, this one's kind of a big one, I think. I don't know how much longer it's going to go. We thought it was only 2020. They've extended it all the way through 2021 so far. I don't know if it's going to go into 2022. But you ought to check out the scholarship fund page. We don't have any at Yale right now for this program. So I would go to IWI's website. There's a whole page with 4 or 5 different criteria that they consider. Those scholarships, in my experience, run from about $500 to $2,000. So pretty cool if you qualify for one of those. So think gender, think minority status. If you work for an independent firm, so not one of the big banks or brokerages, you work for an independent firm, you may get a scholarship. So go check that page out and just see if you qualify for one of those. Logistically speaking, here's how it would go. You would do the scholarship application first, and that's, it's non-binding. You don't have to accept it, and you're not locking yourself into anything. Then you would do candidacy. You would apply for candidacy after you receive information. So it's a separate process. So that can be like step 2 is apply for candidacy. And then registering for the Yale program would be your 3rd step to get this thing rolling. So scholarship 1, apply for candidacy, and then you would register for the Yale program. And then I did mention this at least briefly before. That $4,500 buys you access to our program material, both the course and the test prep, for a year. Now, it shouldn't take anybody a year, but things come up, right? And every once in a while, we get somebody in that situation. And so what I would recommend you do, if your employer's paying and it's not a big deal, you pay, I think right now it's half the price for a 2nd year. It's $2,250. If it's coming out of your pocket, well, maybe that's not so good, and you don't want to do that. Here's what you can do if you don't want to pay and you're not quite done, or you haven't passed the cert exam yet. You just download everything. As long as you don't share it, we don't see it out there in the public domain, you're good, and you just study off your hard drive. You just need to get the course requirements done that I'll talk about in a few minutes. That's really all you have to do in your year, because you could just download all the test prep and then just study off your own hard drive until you are ready to take the exam. So it really shouldn't be an issue. You really shouldn't need to pay for additional access. But if it's more convenient, you prefer that, and maybe somebody else is paying for it, well, then you have that option too. All right, let me talk about study time expectations. Then we'll see if you've got more questions through Fiona. So this one's a big one, and it's big because it's really important to you because you have a life. And when I was doing these, I had a life too. So I get it. I was there. I was sitting in your chair once upon a time as well. 100 to 200 total study hours. That's like from day one where you log into the Yale course and test prep, from day one to the time you take and pass your certification exam, 100 to 200 hours. Yeah, I bet you that covers 70% of our candidates. So it's a big number. Now it varies between 100 and 200, but that's very normal. All in, total time needed. That being said, as I mentioned, kind of fast tracking before, if you want to try to knock all this out in a month or two, we do have people knock all this out in about 4 to 6 weeks. Those are the super accelerators, if you will. But if you've got the knowledge and you've got the time, you can do that. So it's really up to you in terms of how quickly you're going to get through this. Now, I also mentioned you might be like, whoa, hold down, Jim. That's just, I don't want to rush this. I want to get as much out of it as I can, and I really want to pass that exam on the first attempt, so I don't have to go back and take it again. It could take you hundreds of hours, especially if you're only a few years into the business. All you've ever done is the series exams. Think the Series 7. It could take you a lot longer than the 100 to 200 hours. So there is a pretty wide range on the tails. Think population-based curve on the tail side. We've got, I don't know if I call them fat tails, but we have noticeable tails around that average. It does, of course, depend on your experience and your knowledge, especially knowledge on the technical areas from that detailed content outline. That's why I think it's so important for you to really scrutinize not just the one pager I showed you earlier, but the 4 to 5 page, really detailed line by line version, because you want to be asking yourself, how much do I know about this? Is it going to help me in practice to know more about this? Those are the kind of things you want to do as you analyze that document. Your study habits really important. Come back to that one in a second. Test taking skills are important as well. These are harder exams at this level. So Series 7, I would argue, is somewhere between beginner and intermediate. It's not an easy test, but it's definitely not a hard test. If you had good memory, good recall, and you had a good test prep provider, which there are so many of them out there, those tests don't change a lot. So it's really easy to study for them. And it's actually not all that hard to pass them. This is at a different level. You're going to have to think through questions, just like CFA or CFP. There are going to be some rote memory questions, but clearly the majority are not. They're going to be fact patterns and situations. You've got to analyze, make recommendations, dissect things. So it's a deeper level of cognitive thought that's required. And we need to get you ready for that. So that's why we want to give you way more time than you probably need. Way more time, meaning that year, just in case you're taking things a little bit slower. Hey, on study habits, here's just one of many tips I could give you, but no matter what certification, and if you're doing CIMA, if you're doing Yale particularly, I think study habits are really important right now, more than ever. Again, with such deep material, you're going to really have to get it deep into thought. You're not going to just be reviewing note cards and memorizing things like you did for the Series 7. You're going to do some of that, but most of this is going to be reading at a much deeper level. So you need to make sure in your study time that you schedule each week, you can really remove all the clutter and all the distractions, including family. So like if you're studying at home and the family's in the next room and you can hear the TV and the kids are coming in, that's just not going to be real conducive for you to study at the level you need to. So kind of cool thing with COVID is a lot of us have more time to do things like this, but the downside is we might have more distractions in that time. So you just need to make sure that you can carve out time where you can get alone and you can get quiet for 30 minutes to an hour at minimum, to 2 hours typically on the long end of study sessions. And again, as you figured out, hey, look, you can finish this thing. You could do it in 2 weeks. We've never had anybody do it in 2 weeks. I think between 3 and 4 weeks is the world record for Yale candidates. But 4 to 6 weeks for those of you trying to fast track, super fast track, 4 to 5 months is very normal. All right, let me just let you eyeball this. And while you're doing that, Fiona, let's see if we've got more questions.
Do we need a firm to sponsor us to take or hold the CIMA certification?
Good question. So that probably comes from many, many years ago where that used to be a requirement of CIMA certification. You had to be sponsored and or referred by a designee. That's no longer the case. So that's not currently a requirement. The requirements are an acceptable regulatory background. So they are going to pull your U4 if you're in the industry, and if you're in trust, I think there's some different documents. They're going to run your background just to make sure that's acceptable. You need to have 3 years of experience in financial services, not just investments, but really almost anything in financial services. That being said, a new rule as of about a year or two ago, which is kind of a really good thing, I think, for some of you, you don't have to start the process once you hit 3 years. You can start before you've hit your 3 years of accepted experience. Now, if you went, let's say you had 2 years, you knocked out the Yale course, you took and passed the CERT exam in 6 months, and you were still 6 months out from your 3-year work anniversary in the business, well, fine, you've met all the requirements for certification except for experience. You just have to wait 6 months till you hit that 3-year mark, and then you can use the marks. So the point is, you can start this process and work all the way through it before you hit the 3 years. You would just have to wait for that last requirement box to be checked, if that makes sense.
Can you obtain the CIMA if you work at a wealth management firm but are not yet registered with a broker dealer?
Yeah, good question. So I've been talking about the securities exams that most of you have taken or are going to take. Yeah, you can actually achieve CIMA certification before you've taken those. Again, now you'll have to have your 3 years, right? You'll have to have your 3 years. You'll have to complete the education course. You'll have to pass the certification exam, and you'll have to have an acceptable regulatory history. But if you can check all those boxes, then yes, you could actually, we don't have that many do it, but you could earn CIMA certification before you've actually gotten licensed in the business. Good question.
They can see if readings come from multiple texts. Will they have access to all of them?
Yeah, good question. So that's a great segue into the course. Well, and let's just call it a program that has 2 components. Part A, think of that as the course, and part B on the next slide is going to be your test prep. So when you come to us, if you choose us, then we're going to not even worry about test prep, right out of the gate. You're going to come in and do the course. It takes about 40 hours. You can knock it out in 25 or 30, but I don't want you to rush. So we recommend about 40 hours to watch about 30 something hours of lecture. So just like if you were in New Haven sitting in our classroom, it's just we're lecturing in the Yale studio and, in front of a camera, and it's on demand, of course. And then you're just doing your lectures that way. So you're watching the lectures, going through their slides, taking your notes. And then there are tests after different subsections of those lectures. Right now, there are 11 required tests, and they range from about a dozen to 2 dozen questions typically. I would say they're squarely intermediate. They're not advanced, they're not beginner, they're kind of in the middle. And that's really just meant to make sure you're paying attention and make sure you're following along, because since I'm not lecturing or teaching with you right there in person, and I could see that you're there and you're awake if we're there in New Haven, but we can't see that online. So we need some kind of accountability, and these short tests do that. So once you watch those videos, pass your 11, I would call them relatively short tests, then you've completed the education course. And that's the crux of the course. It's just get your foundation. We can't teach all 500 topics and 1,000 plus subtopics in those 30 something hours. We just want to hit kind of key foundational topics and applications, and some that are a little more challenging that we think you might struggle with in test prep. So we cover some of those too. And then towards the end of the education course, we start easing you kind of into the test prep mode, if you will. So that's kind of the course in a nutshell. There is that library that you mentioned where we've got readings lined up to the detailed content outline. So all those 4 to 5 pages, we've got those lined up with readings from about three or four main texts, and then a handful of other kind of one-off texts. The Investment Advisor Body of Knowledge, the Wiley book that I put together a few years ago for IWI, it's more of a graduate level, highly technical text. Investment Planning Answer Book by Jay Shine, I think is a really nice, easier read. So that one's really a nice complement to Investment Advisor Body of Knowledge. Math for Investment Consultants is an old workbook by IWI. We use that for a lot of the math that you'll do in test prep. Point is, you've got access to all of those in the library per your question, and you can download, save, print any of that you want. Now, the textbooks are kind of long, like the Investment Advisor Body of Knowledge. That's like 1,100 pages. So I don't think you're going to want to print that one out. Some of the text you can buy on Amazon, like that one, is usually around $100. I mean, you may have to search for a few weeks to see the price go down, and no, I don't get any royalties, wish it did. But anyway, you can buy some of these through Amazon or barnesandnoble.com or elsewhere, but you'll have access through PDF versions in the course. Good question. So since I'm on a little bit of a roll, Fiona, I'm going to keep plowing through this. We'll get to the test prep slide, and then I'll come right back to you for more questions if there are any. So keep those coming in. So once you pass the course, remember, pass the required 11 short tests, you've earned your Yale certificate, because that's tied to you passing this part of the program, not earning certification. Now, I want all of you to go on and get your certification, of course, but that's when you qualify to get your Yale certificate of completion from SOM. And then you're going to be eligible to schedule your cert exam. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then the test prep's going to populate for you. And here's some information on the test prep. So I'm going to let you stare at that for a minute. And Fiona, let's see if we've got any more questions.
Yeah, we have a questions about the final exam, the test. Is the exam available anytime or only at a certain times during the year? Do you go to a testing center?
Great questions. All right, so here's how the testing works. We're going to call it the certification exam, not the final exam or not test or whatever. Let's just stay with a consistent jargon here. So the certification exam is the big exam that you take after you finish an education provider's course, and you've done whatever test prep you want to do, and you're ready. Now, if you choose Yale, you're doing our course, obviously. You're studying our test prep, obviously, and then you're going to go take your exam. You can take it in person, off-site, and so that's Pearson VUE testing centers. You could actually go to pearsonvue.com and look up and see how close a testing center is to you. They have them all over the world, so there's probably going to be one within decent driving distance, or you can take it at home. They now have that available through ProctorU, and so that we give you some guidance once you get into the Yale program on which one you might want to choose, because I definitely think it's better for some to go in person, and it's just fine for some to do it at home. So I think you probably want a little bit of guidance there, and that's a very individual choice, of course. Logistically speaking, regarding the cert exam, so when you pass your education course, whichever one you choose, IWI, and we tell IWI within 24 hours, basically, of you passing the Yale course. So then IWI is going to send you back an email in a day or two and say, hey, congratulations, Fiona, Yale said you passed the education course. Yay. All you got left is your certification exam. We're opening up a 120-day window for you to schedule your exam. So 120 days shouldn't be a problem. We're going to give you 30, 60, and 90-day test prep schedules. So if you want to fast track it, obviously you go for the 30 days. Try to get through all the 23 sections, the 1,500 test prep slides, about 6 to 7 hours of video from me droning on through those 1,500 slides, where I'm trying to give you a heads up for what is most and least tested in the 500 plus topics. And then over 1,000 practice questions between the practice questions in the 23 sections. And just if that wasn't enough, just one final full-length mock exam that you can actually take on a 5-hour schedule, just to kind of try to replicate sitting there and trying to stay focused for 5 hours. So, you go through that in 30, 60, or 90 days, go take your test. So that's kind of how the test looks and the logistics of it. Lastly, speaking of the test, and I'm happy to answer other questions about it as well. It's all multiple choice. Every question or item, as they're called, has 4 answer choices. It's 140 questions. You have 5 hours to complete the exam, whether you do home testing or on-site testing. And 15 of those questions are beta unscored items, just like CFA and just like CFP. IWI does it too. They're going to be questions, they call them beta questions, that they're not going to be scored. They're just trying them out. You won't know which ones those are. And you just plow through. So 125 of the 140 are going to be scored. They use modified NGOF, like a lot of other certifying bodies. So the cut pass score could vary. I think it's holding right around 76, 77%, i.e. you need to get 76 to 77% of those 125 scored questions correct to pass the exam. So if my math is right, I think that's about 96, give or take, questions of the 125 to pass this exam. So hopefully that helps a little bit more on the exam. All right, Fiona, any other questions right now?
In general, what are the more challenging topics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it totally varies by candidate. And I've been doing this with CIMA candidates and other certifications even beyond that, but for 15 years. So for some candidates, I bet it's at least a third. It's kind of the math. They're not bad at math, but they just don't do math at this level all the time. And maybe it's been 10, 15, 20 years since they did math like this in college. So the math can be a tripping point, and it can be a bit overwhelming. But if you come through the Yale program, we're going to kind of show you, look, this is important math. This probably not so much, because I don't think they're going to test you on it. So make sure you nail this down. You've got several resources between videos. We even have a workshop series by John Nersessian, and really all he does is math and just work you through sample problems and that kind of thing. So the math can be one. The application-based questions can be, that would be the other area that I would identify. Some people just have trouble focusing and processing information in a relatively short period of time. So if they get a multi-layered fact pattern, they have to figure out, well, what's even important and what's not, because sometimes they're going to throw in extraneous information. So, okay, now I got to like what's important. Now I got to just logically go through that and maybe follow a 3-step process to get to the answer. It's just hard for some people to process in that kind of way. So I think the application questions can be challenging for some candidates. Really, really good question. All right, I'll take one more question, Fiona, and then we'll keep moving, but we're in pretty good shape. We got about 10 minutes left.
Does the full-length mock exam consist of new questions or collection of practice questions already covered?
Yeah, great question. It's all new questions. We actually used to have 2 or 3 mock exams in this program. The challenge was hardly anyone ever did the 2nd or 3rd mock exam. Like they got through all the practice sets, and then they did one full-length mock exam. They're like, I'm done. I'm exhausted. I'm just going to go take the test. But I don't want that to happen anymore, because there's some really good questions in those other 2 mock exams. So a couple of years ago, I said, okay, we're going to change that. We're just going to have one full-length mock exam. It's going to have all different questions. I'm just going to take all the other mock exam questions for the other 2 mock exams. I'm going to roll those into the section questions, because I want you to see, if we have 1,075 questions or whatever it is, I want you to see all of them. I want you to see every single one of them. You don't need 2,000 or 3,000 questions. The slides, the videos, the readings are just as important as your practice questions. But the practice questions we do put in front of you, I want you to review them and scrutinize them. So it's a little bit tricky on getting that balance and that number right. But that's one of the reasons we have 1,000. It's also a reason why we don't have 2,000 or 3,000. Good question, though. All right, so let's just plow ahead here. Calculator policy, not going to spend much time on this. If you're new to financial calculators or don't have one, go to tvmcalcs.com at the bottom here. Really cool website, it's free. He's even got how to choose your financial calculator, like if you're studying for CFP or CIMA or CFA or others, here's what he would recommend. The HP 10B2 Plus and the HP 17B2, B2 Plus, those are probably the more popular calculators we have. I use a 12C. I wouldn't use that. It's the learning curve is just too much. So if you have one, but you hadn't used that in 20 years, I'd get one of these others. Go to this guy's website. He's got some nice tutorials on how to pick one. And then once you have 12 or 15 really common calculations that you would be using your financial calculator for. So if you're rusty on this or new to it, go spend an hour on this website. That will pay some big dividends for you. All right, this is really important. So where's my help? It is an online program. It's meant for you to be autonomous. It's meant for you to be self-learning and answer a lot of your questions. So with that in mind, having done this for a long time and dealt with this exam over the years as it's changed, I can somewhat predict, not perfectly, of course, but I can predict more or less where a lot of candidates are going to get tripped up and need extra help. So we get ahead of that through videos, best tips. I'm sending you out weekly messages for your first 5 months in the program or something. So we can get through a lot of your FAQs, if you will, in that kind of way. Speaking of FAQs, the discussion board is great because you guys can talk to each other. We don't publish who you are and your contact information, but you can do that in the discussion board. Hey guys, I'm new to the program. I need accountability. So anybody want to join me for an hour or 2 hours every Tuesday night to just go through what we're studying? So you can do that kind of thing. We have question sections for all 23 sections and the exam and some other things. So that's very lively. There's discussion going on almost every day in the discussion board. And then we keep, we're gonna remove some as they get older, but if they're really important and or asked a lot, we're gonna keep those in for you. So that's a great resource for you as well. In terms of administrative and technical issues, technical meaning like technology, my videos have been working fine. And then all of a sudden, man, they really look funky. I don't know what's going on. Well, it's probably an operating system or a firewall. Maybe you're now on the platform using a different computer or different connection. So you've got Canvas help on a 24/7 basis. That's by phone, email, or what I like if I ever have a Canvas issue is just chat, online chat. Dobbs Education and Yale staff are available from 8 to 5 Eastern, Monday through Friday. So if you're kind of embarrassing, but I forgot the URL, I didn't save it, or I forgot my password, my username, or forgot how long I have left in the Yale program, you're just going to reach out to us for that. And then on content and study help, really important. We're not priced as a 4 academic credit or degree program course, because that's not what this is. So we can only offer so much help on the content side. If you've got a question, I just don't understand the CAPM or SML, CAL, this is all confusing to me. I've been through the video, I looked at the slides, I even tried the practice questions, but I just don't get it. And Jim says in that video, it's going to be tested probably. So I would say go to the discussion board first and see if it's in there. Chances are, if it's CAPM, it is in there. But you get about a dozen lifelines, as we call them. If you need to reach out to faculty, Eric Rabanian, one of the other faculty, he's brilliant in math. And that's one of the reasons we've got him doing a lot of the interaction with you guys. You get about a dozen of those. So you're going to want to keep those in your back pocket. But if you run into something, you're like, man, it's really important. I know it is for the test. Jim says it is, and I just don't get it. I'm going to use one of my 12 questions to reach out to Eric and help and get him to help me through this. We do that in writing first. You can do a follow-up phone call with him if you want, but we want it to be in writing so you can put it in your notes. That way, if you're like me, 3 weeks later, I wouldn't even remember what I asked Eric, let alone how he helped me get through it. I want it to be in writing so you can keep it for study later. And then on study plans and strategies, am I studying the right thing? Is my timing schedule ridiculous, or is that doable? You're going to reach out to Eric or me. A phone is usually better for those, because in 10 minutes, we can kind of talk you through and make sure you've got a good plan and you feel good about it. Really important. Those don't count towards your dozen lifelines for content related questions. All right, great faculty. Toby Moskowitz, I've been working with him for probably almost 15 years now. University of Chicago, we were both doing work over there, and he was on faculty, and then he moved over, and not long after I ended up moving over to Yale. I think we're both really, really happy that we did. Hopefully this is the forever home for me in terms of these professional certifications. Roger Ibbotson, probably like me, some of you got his historical work on your shelves there, stock, bonds, inflation, you know, those journals. So he's great. And then we've got a couple of practitioners that do some work in the program too, John Nersessian being one of those. He does a great job, and he's been involved in CIMA exam and prep material for a long time, just walking through the more common calculations in that formula sheet that you have for the exam. So those are really highly rated. I think you'll benefit a lot from those. All right, I'll let you read through the feedback, and you can go on our website, and there's a whole lot more of this. You know, the qualitative is great, and we survey you after you've taken the CERT exam, pass or fail, because we want to get like really raw, really accurate data. So we're shooting for high 4s out of 5, even though this is a certification exam and not everybody's going to pass. That's okay. Still want to shoot for those high 4s. I may be most proud of our NPS, or Net Promoter Score, there at the bottom of 68. If you don't know what that is, just Google it. You need to know what that is, because your firm is probably doing that, whether you know that it's called a Net Promoter Score or not. All right, and then lastly here, you know, how important is flexibility? How important is studying on your own schedule, fast or slow? How important is customizing your learning plans? Because with us, you're going to get videos, readings, right? You're going to get all kinds of different tools. I recommend you use them all, but clearly some are going to kind of gravitate towards their learning styles and preferences in that regard. Comprehensive coverage, yeah, between the course and the test prep, you're certainly going to get comprehensive coverage of the 500 plus topics and most of those subtopics as well. You do need to have motivation and self-discipline. So like I said on a couple of slides ago, you're going to have help when you need it, but it's not like you're going to just reach out all the time. I mean, that is limited. So if you don't feel comfortable enough to be motivated and stick with our plan and work through yourself, then this probably is not the program for you. But hey, look, if you're up for a challenge, that is CIMA certification, and you want to be part of the Yale family, have Yale in your LinkedIn and a certificate hanging on your wall, and just be associated with Yale on the professional certification side, then yeah, certainly want to invite you to join us, or at least consider joining us. Here's a link, just like some of those other links I showed you. When you're ready to apply for candidacy, you go do that at IWI. And then when you've got your number, you're going to jump onto our website and register for the course. And then just our contact information. Fiona, great resource for anything Yale and School of Management. If you've got questions about CIMA and CPWA, and you want a copy of that current detailed content outline and formula sheet, again, you can get them off our website, or you can just shoot me a quick email, and I should be able to do that tonight, get you a copy of those in PDF form. All right, so that's it from me, Fiona. I know we're right up on the time, but I can stick around for a few minutes if we've got questions.
Yes, we have 2 questions here, unless we have more trickling in. The first, other than the time commitment, which is harder, CIMA, CFP, or CFA?
Yeah, clearly CFA. There's more content in CFA than any. It goes the deepest, in my opinion, academically, and you got 3 really grueling tests. So, you know, I've seen success rates of CFA candidates be about 7%. In other words, 7% of people who take the first exam or are registered to take the first exam make it all the way through. 3 to 4 years, because most candidates fail at least one of those at least one time. I think the CIMA certification exam questions are a little harder than CFP, but there's less material in CIMA. So candidates in our program anyway get through a lot faster than CFP, just because you don't have to study as much. But I would argue that the questions are worded a little bit more challenging on CIMA than CFP. Good question.
How long are most of the video? I think you said 30 to 60 minutes.
Yeah, good question. So it's all over the board. Now on the test prep side, well, let me start with the course side. So that's just like traditional lecture, like you're sitting in class. Most of those are about an hour. Hour and a half would kind of be on the longer end, 30 minutes would be on the shorter end, but those are all on demand. So, you know, you stop and then you just mark where you're at, and then you just come back later. Depending on your computer setup, it may even remember where you were, again, that's relative to the setup you have, but that's not a big deal. So if you like prefer to study in 30-minute chunks, well, you can do that. You just watch the first half of that lecture and then you come back and watch the second half. They're chunked down a bit more on the 23 sections of test prep. Those are anywhere from about 7 or 8 minutes to 30 minutes. And again, same kind of thing, on demand. So if you don't finish one, you just kind of come back later and pick up where you left off. Good question.
Thanks, Jim. I think that's all the questions we got today. And
Wonderful.
we're on time.
Well, thank you, everyone. And Fiona, back to you.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for submitting so many thoughtful questions. We really appreciate that. For more information, you can visit our website or reach out to us directly with any additional questions. This webinar, including the video recording and the slides, will be shared in the coming days. While we hope to see you in our program, we truly wish that you find a program and path that's the best fit for you. So thank you again for sharing your time with us. This concludes the webinar. Bye, Jim.